Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, a Yeti. Bigfoot Yeti. Contact Report 007.
Well, you are right with your view that the human beings of the earth are not descendants of the apes. They were partially begotten by our forebears, who also mixed themselves with earth beings, who were simply called Eves at that time. A designation that means nothing other than
the bearing women, or the one giving birth.
Sure, but once again, you beat me to it. But the earth beings at that time were of the most diverse forms and kinds. Some of them were completely wild creatures of human-like forms, some of which had been marooned on the earth in earlier millennia by our forebears, that is, their descendants. These descendants of the marooned were abused by foreign spacefarers, and these fertilized also by genetic manipulation different animal species and produced new life forms by genetic engineering. One of these, by the way, is the ape being still known today, which represents a human-animal mutation, namely the Pan-Paniscus bonobo chanderm pygmy chimpanzee. Thus, the ape being is descended from the human being, not vice versa. Other ape beings resulted from natural evolution in the hominid line. Your researchers and scientists have already found many in-between mutations between humans and ape beings, but usually only as skeletons or partial skeletons. These in-between mutations, part human, part ape being, are known to the human beings under names such as Africanus, Peking man, and Neanderthal, and so on. 4 different species of them have survived over all past millennia, and their descendants still live today, although no longer in large hordes, but only isolated or in very small groups. They are so wild and shy that human beings will hardly ever see them. The human beings have coined special names for them, Yeti and so forth. The Eves were, besides earth-created hominid living creatures, nothing more than very wild descendants of those marooned thousands of years ago, from whom at that time any tools were taken away.
Contact Report 260.
My next question: Yeti, Bigfoot, and Sasquatch. These are 3 beings of which there is talk over and over again. For quite some time, there has particularly been talk again about the Sasquatch being in Florida's swamps in the Everglades. Again and again, people appear in public who claim that they would have observed such prehistoric human beings. Can one believe these statements?
Some statements are actually true, others are based on deceit, and still others are based on making oneself important or on simple fibbing. Nevertheless, there is no doubt that these beings still actually exist.
Contact Report 467.
As your father, Svath, explained to me in my youth, the first small forms of life that developed from the primeval slime, from which humans also emerged on Earth, lived more than 250 million years ago, and also at the time when the first dinosaurs existed. These small life forms were about 10 to 12 centimeters in size, about the size of a mouse, but they changed and grew a few centimeters larger. Their lifetime was just 1 year, but with time their age increased, the bigger they became. The transformation over millions of years led to different life forms, but only to mammals, and finally to many species of primates, and to forms from which humans emerged, and from which also the different apes and those creatures that have not been found yet, like the Yeti, which is called Mahalidama by the locals and Mandabarung elsewhere. Also Bigfoot and Sasquatch, etc. belong to it. Now, to cut a long story short, what is the name of the little animal that is the origin of all mammals, primates, and humans?
Our name of the small creature is Barani, but the little animal is now also known to earthly paleontologists through findings of fossilized bones, and they call it Adelobasileus cromptoni.
Contact Report 544.
With your help, I was indeed able to twice see a Yeti in the Himalayan region, which were around 3 meters tall and were most distant descendants of tall great apes, whose most distant ancestors largely died out 75 million years ago as a result of the effects of the Tobo supervolcano eruption in Sumatra, I was told. I do no longer know the designation for these giant apes, which you, however, can certainly tell me again. But what interests me is whether the legendary Bigfoot in America, the Sasquatch in Canada, and the similar creatures spotted in the south of the USA are also most distant descendants of the giant great apes?
This is indeed the case, because both in northern India, Pakistan, Tibet, and in the north and south of the USA, small populations of the hominid Gigantopithecus giganteus, as they are called in earthly paleontology, survived. During the time between 7 and 9 million years ago, natural disasters occurred, through which once again a decimation of these human-like ape creatures took place, just as it, however, also did about 100,000 years ago. Then, a mere 75,000 years ago, the supervolcano Tobo erupted in Sumatra and created a worldwide climate catastrophe and radical climate change, through which, over the course of more than 10 years, many species of life forms died out. The genus Gigantopithecus giganteus was decimated too, yet smaller populations of the actual giant apes survived in various places, as did, however, also some few subspecies. And from these few populations, some extremely small and very isolated groups have persisted to the present day, which live in the areas you mentioned. To these human-like and upright ape creatures, which still exist today in really only the very smallest isolated groups, belong the so-called Yeti, Bigfoot, and Sasquatch.
Thank you. Then this is also for once clearly told. And as I have been able to see such creatures twice with your help, I can also say that these extraordinarily hairy creatures look really human being and ape-like, and have nothing to do with big bears, as the Austrian mountaineer Reinhold Messner claims loudmouthedly to the contrary.
Contact Report 816.
Then a question. Do you actually still have primordial creatures on Era, as we do, that supposedly or really exist, such as the Yeti?
Nothing is known about this on our planet. But in the annals of Svath I read that he and you in Siberia not only found footprints of 40-some members and then a...
Please, not that. It's nobody's business, and I do not want to talk about it either.